Good morning, viewers, and welcome once again to this edition of the USI Strategic Perspective. I have with me once again Major General S.B. Asthana, who is the Director of Courses at the USI, and he has written a number of articles on the Middle East and particularly focused on Israel and Gaza conflict, which is ongoing. He has a deep knowledge of this area and he's going to share some of his thoughts about this area with all of us today. And today our topic is what after Sharm el Sheikh? We've seen this peace agreement being hammered out by President Trump. How was it possible? How did this come about? There have been major steps taken, such as the return of the 20 living hostages. And today morning, two bodies of two of the hostages have been returned. There's still some to go, but there are also talks within the strategic community that the Hamas is unaware of where some of the bodies are, because there are a number of factions who picked up these hostages. So there are various issues that need to be discussed, but it's been little over 2 years of the war, and this ceasefire, which has eluded all previous attempts, seemed unachievable, has suddenly been achieved. But will it hold out? We've already seen the Vice President of the US, Vance, rush to Israel to try and ensure that the ceasefire doesn't collapse. There have been reports of two Israeli soldiers having been killed in Rafah day before yesterday. There's a attack on Palestinians in which about 45 people died. But these are all reports that come out. So my main question to you, sir, is military operations has been carried out, and now some sort of peace and stability is what was looking positive for everybody, and cessation of bombs has stopped. But what Gaza's endured should never be allowed to happen again. And there are lovely books written on this. So where do we stand now, sir? There are various lines people talk about where the Israelis should withdraw. There are various issues in that 20-point charter, and some of the main ones are, regarding the ISF, the composition, the task, the funding, the reconstruction of Gaza, the handing over of arms by the Hamas, and finally somebody to govern this area. And finally is the question, which is yet not answered in fine script, is what is the future of Palestine, the two-nation state solution. So can you just throw some light on all this? First, just tell us a little bit about the peace accord. And in your view, do you think it will hold?
Firstly, it's a fragile peace, and this fragile peace was necessitated by various factors. And the most important factor was that Israel and US both were getting under tremendous pressure because of the weight of casualties which were happening in Gaza, a relative sense of isolation in United Nations, and most of the allies of Israel and US also giving an ultimatum that in October, and especially in the UNGA assembly, we will recognize the state of Israel, and they did. Many of them did. So US was under tremendous pressure, and so was Israel.
Recognize the state of Palestine, sir.
Oh, exactly. So once this was happening, that time both of them were under tremendous pressure that something should happen. The second issue was a growing discontent in Israel itself because of hostages. Now, if we look at last 2 years of war, if Israel could get some hostages, it was only by negotiations. By military pressure, they hardly got anybody, not more than 2 to 3 guys. So it was also seen that if you have to get the hostages, then negotiations is the answer, number one. And number two, why no negotiations were happening? Because of the compulsions of Netanyahu. Netanyahu has a problem that he thought that the day the war is over, his chair is gone. And therefore, his chair was actually being supported by hardliners. And those hardliners were in no mood for negotiations, because if it is only left to the hardliners, Their view is we must have greater Israel right from river to sea, that is Gaza, that is Jordan River to Mediterranean Sea, and everybody else must either vanish or should remain as a second class citizen. Everything should be Israel. This is the hard line of Israel. As far as Hamas is concerned, they are also hardliners. Their hard line is that Israel has, they don't recognize Israel. As simple as that. That was these were the two positions.
So you mean there have been compromises taking place on both sides?
There has been a compromise. Now let's take each player one by one as to what was the reason and compulsion, what was they trying to achieve, and what did they achieve. Let's take first US. President Trump was very keen that his isolation and his criticism on Israel should come down, because it was being seen that he is being over generous to Netanyahu and he is being allowing him to carry on with this genocide with no consequences on Netanyahu. So he wanted to show something, and also, of course, his desire for Nobel Peace Prize, which he keeps talking about
that is
every time. And a mad rush, because that time the Nobel Prize was about to be announced. Although he didn't get it,
so now maybe 2026 he'll get it.
So he didn't get it. That's a separate issue, and I think rightly so. Perhaps Norwegian didn't give in to his pressure. Now the question was that he thought that if he can broker a peace in a manner, even by threat or by coercion or by a mix of everything, all other factors, then it may be a great step. So what he did was he did coerce Hamas as well, and more so after the Hamas leaders were attacked in Qatar. There was again a discomfort on US. That discomfort was because of their influence in the Arab world, because Qatar was disturbed, Saudi Arabia got disturbed. That means they thought that when it comes to Israel, US is not going to support us. It is Israel which is priority, and therefore they got into some kind of agreement with Pakistan. Now this actually indicated that US has become unreliable.
So this striking of Qatar, sir, do you think it was a strategic mistake by Israel?
Yes.
Or it was a turning point? Qatar has been struck twice.
Yes.
One by Iran and now by Israel.
Yeah, and it was a turning point. It was certainly a turning point.
And this gave impetus to
exactly.
this.
And that is why you would have seen that as a prelude to this deal, he also signed an ordinance that we will defend Qatar. This was the indirect message to Netanyahu that enough is enough. You can't strike Qatar because you are now playing into our interest. You are playing against the American interest, and therefore you must hold on. So that was a subtle message too. So therefore what he achieved was that he certainly got a, shall I say, self-praise, as well as he patted himself and made sure that all his supporters, which include some European allies and some Arabian allies, they also pat him at his back, especially like Sharif.
I know, he praised him a lot.
Who was not only praising, but perhaps the kind of language which he was using was also getting embarrassing actually to an extent. But notwithstanding that, that is where he wanted, and that is what he achieved as far as this particular phase one part of it.
So the phase one you've talked about,
that is the first part.
First part.
So this is what was
so
achieved.
Now my question is the second part of the phase.
I'm coming to that. Now let's take the other side. What Israel had in it. As far as Israel is concerned, firstly Netanyahu was under pressure from Trump, and not only that, when he met Trump, forced him to speak to the Emir of Qatar and apologize. And he did speak to him for the strike which he has done, number one. Number two, he also told him that you are not going to get the hostages without negotiations. So Netanyahu knew that if he gets the hostages, then his internal dissent, he may be able to somehow calm down to some extent, because there were fair amount of protests which were happening in Israel, especially led by the relatives of the hostages. So what he achieved was that he got his 20 hostages back. That is 20
But for the Hamas, that leverage is gone now.
And Hamas, this was a major leverage for Hamas, which is gone. The second issue was as far as the bodies are concerned. Some they have given, some are left, which they are finding it difficult to locate, which is understandable because they must have moved their a number of times to a number of places. They must have moved the hostages to a number of places, and there was so much of shelling going on. So I'm sure that must be a problem. That's one part. So now this is as far as the first part is concerned. Now
So the second part
now comes the difficult part.
The difficult part, the
now
critical
the difficult
issue.
part is that as far as Hamas is concerned, they are 100% sure that irrespective of how much assurance Trump gives them, if they give the weapons, Netanyahu is going to kill them one by one, whether in Hamas or in whichever country they go. He is going to kill them. So Hamas is not going to give the weapons. It is absolutely clear. Second issue is, as far as the governance is concerned, now various theories were made that okay, we will have firstly a peace commission,
technocratic sort of.
There was Palestinian technocrats, again controlled by an organization led by Trump.
ISF, Board of Management.
Board of Trump. Yeah. And then also some kind of interim stabilization force, and before that some kind of organization being overseen by the former Prime Minister of UK,
Tony Blair.
So this was being thought of. Now, on ground, what is happening is, the moment this happened, Hamas again took the control of Gaza. So once Israelis, the firing stopped, they moved back from the first line and moved to the second line. The situation was that Hamas is still under control. Hamas was out, and Hamas did punish some of the people who collaborated with Israel.
They said they were armed faction.
Yes.
So
and America did not overplay it, for the simple reason, because what was happening was that there were certain miscreants who were creating problems even within Gaza, while Hamas was under pressure. So Hamas was trying to resolve, to perhaps neutralize them, and that was suiting, I think, these people also. So they didn't pay too much of attention. But then at the same time, Hamas did create another fear psychosis in the population of Gaza, which indicated that it's not all that easy to eliminate Hamas from the governing structure. That's one part of it.
So that's what I said, sir. This Board of Peace, which President Trump is talking about, which is going to be controlled by the US and Tony Blair, you correctly mentioned. But they don't feel that Hamas has no role in this, whereas Hamas feels that they must have a role in this.
Exactly.
Secondly, Hamas says they're not willing to lay down their arms. And this is one of the conditions. And you very correctly brought that out, sir. Now, you've talked of Oman, you've talked of other issues. One other issue I want to bring ask you your opinion. You see, normally they say they have external players also, global competition. But in this case, you've seen that Iran today is almost irrelevant in this region. The lowest it's been since 1979. Russia is totally preoccupied by Ukraine, and they're out of Syria, so their influence is also waning. And thirdly is China, major player that's not in there. So actually, this whole thing is controlled and synchronized by the US. So if US wants, they can carry out certain amount of implementation and ensure that they have less obstruction in the path which they have laid down in their 20-point charter. But the first point you covered correctly. The second point you've talked about how difficult it is. The first point is, of course, the handing over of hostages, which has been successful. Now, what about the reconstruction? What about the governance? What about the international stabilization force without the UN mandate over there? So can you throw some light on this?
First, let me talk about Gaza, and then I will talk about the external. As far as Gaza is concerned, the role of Hamas cannot be zero, for the simple reason, because even today, there is no other force which is acceptable to the Palestinians who are in Gaza. There is another angle which not very many viewers are aware of. Even today, the popularity of Hamas in Gaza is more than the popularity of Palestinian authorities. Even today. Secondly, as far as Gazans are concerned, they are very clear. When they went back, they came back to Gaza City after the ceasefire. Their connotation was that we have won. And why they were saying we have won is they were saying doesn't matter that we have lost 68,000 people, but we have forced these people to ceasefire, and they and we not a single guy has left Gaza, despite all kinds of starvation, despite all kinds of atrocities. And they said, this is our jihad. So there is still a feeling that this is our land, we are going to live and die here. So this is not all that easy, that an outside imposed governance structure will work.
So your
Not-
opinion
not all
is
that
that
easy.
Hamas or somebody acceptable to the Gazans has to be part of this,
Has
and
to
you
be part
cannot
of it.
be
So what
depend on outside.
Hamas is not going to give it so easily. Although Hamas has agreed to say that, okay, so long it is a Palestinian organization, we are okay. Palestinian technocrats, they have not said no to them.
They've not said no.
They have not said no. So Palestinian technocrats, if they physically present there, maybe Hamas may be ruling by proxy, by these guys being there. And but they are not going to be totally out of power. That's my anticipation. And there will be clashes. That's why I said it's a fragile peace. Similarly, Israel will continue to find excuses of violations by Hamas. Both will blame each other, and Israel will keep killing people. That also is going to continue.
So,
now, as far as the stabilization force is concerned, basically they are looking at a stabilization force by most of the Arab countries to start with. And in the stabilization force, this experiment has been done by United Nations in many countries, many war-torn countries, to establish the initial governance structure. So, stabilization force concept is not new, and it has been successful. Liberia. So it's a successful concept, provided the hostilities become zero. The problem is the hostilities are unlikely to become zero because of the kind of stake which Hamas holds, and because of their survival, pure survival, and kind of hatred which they have against Israel. So that's as far as Gaza is concerned. Now the second part, I would amplify. I will not say that Russia is out totally, because very recently Al-Sharaf was in Moscow, and when he went to Moscow, basically he had a couple of demands. Al-Sharaf's entire military equipment is Russian because of the previous affiliations, because of the previous regime. Secondly, Al-Sharaf is very apprehensive of Israel. He knows that Netanyahu can't be trusted, and therefore he was looking for some kind of support from Russia in terms of, to some extent, reconstruction, and to some extent, some even presence, physical presence. And I think what Russians were looking for, there are two bases which are there on the Mediterranean.
No, but I'm talking about Russian influence in Gaza, sir.
Okay. So as far as those bases are concerned, that is certainly with there. Now, as far as Gaza is concerned, I don't think Russians are very keen
to get involved
in it, because their hands are tied.
And neither are the Chinese?
Neither are the Chinese to start in the current circumstances. And Iran also was to some extent in favor of some kind of, shall I say, truce happening, because they are also not very keen. But what is going to happen is, as far as US is concerned, their disturbance which is going to come up is because of the discomfort which the hardliners of Israel are going to create. Because again, the hardliners are telling Netanyahu that we will pull back if you do not finish off Hamas. The aim of finishing off Hamas is not done. So long that is not done, the conflict will resurface. Our security threat is not done. It's not over. That is what these hardliners are saying. So hardliners are again prompting Netanyahu, and also Netanyahu is under pressure because of his legal cases. Although Trump is trying to help him out, because if you recall, in his parliament, he said, he told the president, why don't you pardon this guy? No, that is
Correct.
that is somehow he's trying to bail him out, but I don't think Israelis are very keen to bail him out. So there is a internal contradiction in Israel. Their dream of greater Israel is not yet over. Because their dream of greater Israel is not yet over, Hamas is weak. Hamas is struggling for survival, but they also know that giving up weapons is not the case of survival. So this is a situation in which we are, and in all probabilities, my anticipation is that both will find excuses, both will blame each other, but skirmishes and some
Will
kind of fighting
continue.
will start.
But now my final question to you is,
Okay.
that, there's also a fundamental impasse. And that fundamental impasse lies in one of the lines in this accord. And that line says that the plan calls for a pathway to Palestinian self determination and statehood. But in Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu has ruled it out explicitly. But when the Saudi Arabians released a statement, the foreign ministry after this, they very clearly said that the plan must initiate practical steps towards establishment of an independent Palestine state with East Jerusalem as a state, as its capital. So, this statement underscored Saudi Arabia's support for resolution that includes a separate Palestinian state. So, this pathway seems very far off at the moment. So, do you see any progress towards that, or is it an illusion
I don't
at the
see
moment?
much of progress in this case for the simple reason, because this standpoint of Saudi Arabia was there earlier as well. But Saudi Arabia did hardly anything to help the Palestinians, and same is the case with the Arab world, whether it is Jordan, whether it is Egypt, everybody has got certain stakes with the USA. All of them are dependent on USA for many other things, in addition to their security, in addition to even financial. Egypt is very financially intervened with the USA on US aid, and Jordan again has got fair amount of problems. So what is happening is that while they have been talking about independent state of Palestinian for so many years, even during the entire Gaza war, even they have been talking about the Palestinians. They may have no sympathy with Hamas, which, because what Hamas did on 7th of October, I don't think anybody in the world had any sympathy with them. But then the fact is that the number of innocents who got killed, that has taken the world opinion away from Israel. So in this particular case, yes, they will continue to support a separate state of Israel. The President of United States also somehow left a window. But if you see, the fine print is of the 20-point program is there is no time plan
There's no time plan there.
laid down for Israel to withdraw. So that means Netanyahu can be there for as long as possible. So practically, when we come to the summary of it is they were stuck with those 20 guys, those 20 hostages. They have got their 20 hostages, and with those 20 hostages back with them, now initiative is with them. They can recreate a situation in case they want to, in case the Israel is allowed to perhaps pursue some more destruction of Hamas, then
Of Gaza.
Of Gaza, then they can certainly look for an opportunity, and they can blame each other, and they can trigger off something. So this is a possibility. As far as the reconstruction part is concerned, it is far-fetched for a simple reason. The amount of debris somebody had calculated, to remove that debris, it will take 2 to 3 years only to remove debris. Constructions will take time, and people are going to be eyeing for all those contracts. Certainly, Americans are quite smart. They will make money out of it in a manner that the payments will be done by the Arab world. Americans will have their construction companies there, and in all probabilities, they are going to make money the way they have been trying to make money, whether it was in Iraq or it was reconstruction of many other countries, which they finally, in the post-war scenario, which they tried to take it out, and it was again a business deal in some manner or the other. So they are looking for that business deal, whether it will materialize or not. But as of now, as far as Gaza is concerned, it's a fragile peace, although it's a welcome peace, for the simple reason because as a layman and as an analyst and as a member of this world community, certainly we wanted the kind of starvation to end for some time, the kind of miseries which those people were going. And hostages also have done no wrong. They also needed to be released.
No, I agree with you there, sir.
So,
this
therefore,
bombing, devastation, the humanitarian angle is what
Exactly,
we're looking
exactly.
at. And I think you've summed it up beautifully, sir. You've covered all aspects of this in great detail. So, the returning of the hostages and the pulling back and, returning of Palestinian prisoners, which we haven't talked about, both has been achieved. But what is left are very difficult steps which the world needs to take. And these need to be taken by both sides, that is Israel as well as the Gazans. I mean, the life of the ordinary Gazans must be looked at.
And just let me add two more points on this. One is in this particular case, we have to grant President Trump, although he keeps making a whole lot of remarks and a whole lot of over exaggerations of whatever he does of the achievements, but certainly release of these 20 guys was not possible without him.
Yeah, that's what I said, sir, in the beginning. It was what was eluded everybody, unachievable.
That you have to grant.
Yes.
That you have to grant.
Yes.
And secondly, as far as the Palestinian prisoners release is concerned, which you just mentioned, let me tell you, I have seen there, I have been in Israel. Israelis may release 2,000 today, they will arrest 4,000 and next day. So that doesn't make too much of a difference, but yes, some of their hardcore guys have got released. That may be a little consolation for Hamas. So that is what Hamas got. Because obviously they wanted to give something to Hamas also. Otherwise, Hamas would not have released those 20 guys. Because that's the only leverage. So because that leverage got played because they, in the list of the prisoner release of Palestinians, there were certain guys who were included whom they wanted to be released. And that is where perhaps Hamas was also somehow agreed to that. But beyond this, disarming of Hamas, I have my doubts that Hamas will ever agree for getting disarmed, because nobody trusts Israel, and they know that they are going to kill us one by one if we give the weapons. That's the only thing. So let's see how it goes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your incisive comments into this, region. And as you very rightly brought out, the war may be over, but the demanding work is still to take place. Thank you once again, sir. Thank you, and Jai Hind to all of you.
Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, sir.